Conversation is a forum for dialogue of contemporary social and cultural issues which affect an evolving and emerging Indian American community committed to preserving the vast customs of a vibrant cultural heritage.
Welcome to Darshan America, folks. We come to you from Washington, D.C. My name is Ramesh Butani.
And I'm Aastha Verma.
And it's a pleasure to have you back.
I know, I've been gone for a couple of weeks, but...
Where did you go?
I went to South Africa. Actually, it was my first time going to the African continent. And I have to admit, I always had these pre-notions of Africa being very dry and arid, but as it turns out, South Africa is lush and green. I went to wineries there, which I know you'd be a big fan of, and I also had the privilege to go on safari for a few days, which, by the way, I recommend to anyone who decides they need a vacation because it is the ultimate getaway.
I have not understood that. Why would a woman go on a safari? I mean, are you there to kill animals?
It doesn't matter. You're there to see the animals in their natural state of existence.
You can see it in the zoo down here in Washington.
It's not the same thing. It's funny you asked me this question because I thought about this. It's not the same thing. When you see animals in cages, they don't exhibit their natural behaviors. They're a lot of times very restless in those cages or in those enclosed environments. When you see them in the wild, you see how they are. You see their behaviors. You learn about relationships between the animals. It's fascinating. And the best part is you feel so far away from your life, the way you live it here, that you really feel like you got away. It was a fabulous, fabulous trip, fabulous time that I had there. But the most meaningful part of the trip for me was the chance to go to the township in Johannesburg, which is called Soweto. And, only about 20 years ago, you saw the end of the apartheid, which existed in South Africa. And these townships were a part of that apartheid movement that was there for so many years. And it was really a meaningful experience. I mean, I remember reading about this and hearing about it when I was in grade school. So the opportunity to go to the township and actually see the people there, meet the children, meet the kids that live there, it was just a very moving experience. So I highly recommend South Africa as a destination. And really, the people were just so wonderful. My favorite part was, when you say thank you, they come back to you and say pleasure. It's their pleasure, and that is such a delicate, wonderful way of being welcomed into the country. It stayed with me. It's going to stay with me for a long time.
So, folks, the new word is don't say you're welcome, say a pleasure.
Pleasure.
And how is the wine?
You know what? The wine industry there is quite mature, which is one big reason to go. If you're a wine lover, then it will remind you much of Napa Valley. A lot of the wineries are along the southern coast near Cape Town, and the weather is a lot like San Francisco weather, where it gets chilly at night and it can be quite hot during the day, and they have sloping hills. I mean, very much like Napa, and the wineries themselves are quite well established. You find that it's quite a mature industry, very sophisticated at that.
How about the food?
The food. I do have to talk about the food because I will tell you, part of living in a country that has a lot of different types of game, you eat a lot of different types of game. So I actually had crocodile and ostrich and deer, several different kinds of antelope.
Oh my God!
While I was there, and it was, if you're a meat eater, then you'll enjoy it more, and if you're not, then you might be offended at eating all the animals. But different experience. Their cuisine is very European and very, the experience itself feels like British Columbia.
Yes.
And so you get to enjoy that level of culinary experience along with being in a very different type of environment.
They were governed by the Europeans for a very long time,
The Europeans...
So they were governed by the British for a very long time.
The British and the Dutch, actually, And one thing I'll quickly mention is I didn't know this, that the apartheid, the anti-apartheid movement actually was the result of language being forced into the school system about 20 years ago. This Afrikaans language, which is really an offshoot of Dutch.
Yeah.
And it was that caused the townships to revolt because they were used to learning in their own languages. And they didn't want to have to learn a third language. So if you read the history, it becomes very, very interesting how that country has evolved in the 20 years. Since that movement, I went to Nelson Mandela's house, and that was also very meaningful. So in a way, it was a history lesson along with everything else. So I enjoyed it tremendously.
See, you missed a fantastic time in Washington, D.C. We had good snow, and of course, President Obama got almost every bill passed without the help of the Democrats, you know.
Well, I've been hearing lots of good things about the president since I've come back. And in fact, despite the tragedy that occurred in Tucson, Arizona, I did hear that his speech that he gave really was a very moving speech and may have done a lot, actually, to help him politically.
He's a very good speaker. We all know that. I want to tell you that he has had some success lately.
He needed it.
Yes. But the business of governing that the new Congress is just starting. It's going to be fun. The first thing Republican congressmen want to make sure that they repeal the health law.
I keep hearing about this, but I have a prediction. I might be completely wrong, but I think that that will not succeed. I mean, it's definitely not going to succeed in the Senate. But even in the House, I think as much as the Republicans are trying to make a show of we disagree with President Obama, we disagree with his policies, I think the nation is done with health care. They went through the debate process. They were tired of hearing about it. To resurface the debate, I think America is just going to say, I've had enough. What's done is done. Let's just move on. I think they're not going to pay attention to it.
But there are certain parts of the health bill that are deficit-oriented, and they're going to cut them down to size or starve them of any funding. But one of the things that is changing the lives of the doctors, which affects our community, folks, in 2002, 75% of the doctors were in their own practice. 25% worked for the hospitals. That ratio has moved so fast.
Wow.
Right now, only 35% of the doctors to 40% of doctors are practicing on their own, and everybody else is working in the hospitals or the big doctor groups.
Is that because of the liability side of it? I mean, I'm guessing that has to be the major contributing factor.
You just can't. Being a doctor in your own practice, what do you have to do? You have to keep the books, fight the insurance company, fight the Medicare, still provide the fantastic care, learn new tricks of the trade and the others. It's becoming very difficult,
I think medicine is just one area where there's a lot of red tape. I think that if that industry experiences a revolution in technology, it would help them because there's medical records that are still maintained on paper that are not in electronic form. What happens is it makes life difficult for doctors. So I can completely see why we need a revolution, at least in technology in the medicine field.
This is a revolution. This is where